If there's one thing us pilots love, it's technology. But if there is one thing us pilots love more than technology, it's free technology. Now, I'm not talking about your big paid apps, your electronic flight bag stuff like Garmin Pilot, ForeFlight, AvPlan, OzRunways. These are all free apps that you can download. You can do it whilst you're watching this video, that are going to help you in several stages during your flying. If you're learning to fly, if you're planning a flight, once you're in flight, and also apps that you can use once you've landed and you're down on the ground. I should also say I am filming this in the noisiest hangar. It's really windy outside and the metal doors are just banging and banging, but I'm committed now. I'm here at the airport and I want to film this video for you early in 2024. So it's the noise of an airport. You're going to get the real feeling of what it's like being in a hangar. Before you even jump in the aircraft then and you're planning a flight, the one app I use more than anything else is Windy. Now, you're all going to be familiar with Windy and I'm not going to tell you how to use it. I generally use it for like a 10-day forecast. So like 10 days out from a flight, I'll see what the weather's looking like. Then about 4 days before the flight, I'll have another look and see what it's looking a bit closer to it. A day out, then again, I have another look. Now, Windy, I don't think you can use as an official source of aviation weather. So check your like local regulators for what you can use Windy for and not. But I use it for high level. Should I fly on Saturday or should I fly on Sunday? And then obviously I'm checking the official weather sources before the flight itself to make sure that I'm legal. But one thing I love in Windy, and you might not know this, you don't just have to see the weather for one specific location. What you can do is if I'm planning a flight, say for example, at a waypoint there, say I'm flying over to Adelaide, you can click on this button at the top. See across here, you've got VFR, IFR. I click on VFR most of the time. You can put in the speed you're planning to fly. Let's go 150 knots in Echo Yankee Zulu, and then move the little slider across here to whichever day you're planning to fly. So let's go, for example, let's say on Saturday. And now along the bottom, I can see what the weather's going to be like across that whole leg. So you can see at the start here in Melbourne, there's going to be some low cloud, typical of Melbourne. But then once I come out of Melbourne, it's actually looking pretty good. I've also got wind barbs, so I can see wind speed and direction. And if you click the IFR tab, then you can get things like freezing level and some other additional information which might be more relevant to an IFR flight. Another one I use for planning a lot. It's not so much an app, but I've got a bookmark on my iPad, and I'll put the link down below to something called Auto Router. You go to briefing on their website and go to Gramit and type in your route details. So let's do the same one that we just did. So we'll go Moorabbin to Adelaide. Let's go 8,000 feet. Put in your departure date, and I can do a cruise speed of, say, 150 knots. And in a similar way to Windy, this gives you a graphical view of what your flight's going to be. So from left to right, you're starting at Moorabbin, going to Adelaide. It shows you terrain down the bottom here. It shows you roughly where the cloud's going to be, which I think is really, really useful. So I could see that taking off from Moorabbin, for example, I'm probably going to be in cloud over terrain, but as I get to Adelaide, it's actually going to be quite clear skies. Now, it will show up areas of forecast icing in a different color. There aren't actually any on this chart at the moment. I love this. I use it a lot a few days out just to give me a bit of an idea. Again, I don't know whether this can be legally used for flight planning purposes, but just like the night before, to give you a rough idea of what to expect before you check the weather the morning off the flight from the correct approved flight sources. I really like it. I really recommend it. And yeah, I'll put the link down in the description below. And when I'm flying to an airport, especially one that I might not be familiar with, the other app that I use is Google Maps. I think I'm going to do a flight to a place called Wycheproof soon. And because I've never landed at that airport, what I do is look it up on Google Maps just to get an idea of runway orientation, first of all, but also where the taxiway turnoffs are. In this instance, there's just one at the end of the airport. Like I can see where the windsock is as well. You can see the windsock here. And knowing that before you actually get to the airport just means when you're flying, you know where to look for the windsock and know where you're going to turn off to taxi to get out. It's Google Maps. You know Google Maps. I just think it's really useful. It's an underused tool for aviation. Once you're actually in flight, then there's an app that I use called Units Plus, which is particularly good if ever you fly overseas and you need to convert basically one unit into another. Set up with each of the areas down the left-hand side, things like, you know, area, currency. If you're flying somewhere where they may use imperial, but maybe you're used to working in metric or vice versa. For example, say I've got a runway which is 4,500 feet long. That's a lot of millimeters, but I want to know, say, maybe how long that is in meters. You can instantly just convert it by selecting meters on the right. Pressure conversion is the other one, so click on pressure on the right, and if you want to convert from the US, who uses inches of mercury, to here in Australia, for example, we use hectopascals. Useful app if you ever want to convert anything whilst you're in the air and you can't do the mental arithmetic. The other one, and again, it's an app that you're all familiar with, but you might not use it in this way, but I quite often have Flight Radar open up in the background. I use Flight Radar for things like if I'm flying into an airport. Let's look at Melbourne today, for example. If I was flying into Melbourne and I didn't have access to ATIS, maybe I'm a long way out, but I want to know which runway people are landing on, I quite often open up Flight Radar and I can see, who have we got? We've got this little Qantas link coming in on runway 16. So instantly I know the direction they're landing before I actually get close to the airport. So I can just plan ahead a little bit more. But I do use it for a bit of situational awareness. Like I look, for example, if I was flying to the southeast of Australia, and again, I know that not every aircraft shows up on Flight Radar and you shouldn't rely on it. But if I was going to Merimbula, for example, then I can see, well, look, we've got at least one aircraft who's performing some air work down there at Merimbula. I've got another one who's just departed from there recently. It's a good app to have in the background. It just gives me a little heads up sometimes on what I might expect when I'm flying into an airport. Remember when I did that video on getting my FAA license and I was talking about doing the FAA instrument written exam? I had to go over things like VOR positioning and where are you in relation to this VOR if your display is showing you this. That stuff I'm okay with, but I forget it quite quickly if I'm not staying up to date with it. So I use this app called Nav Trainer. It basically gives you're this aircraft in the middle, and on the right hand side you've got a few different avionic instruments basically that you'd have in your cockpit. Now I'm just going to use the one at the top, ignore the other two, but you can have multiple ones so you can reference two nav aids at the same time. But this compass rose here represents this HSI, and if this is your aircraft here, and what you can do is you can kind of fly your aircraft around and see where you are in relation to that nav aid. And by twisting the compass, you can actually change your direction, so which way you're heading. So you can practice those classic exam questions, like if this is your HSI, which direction, which orientation from the nav aid is your aircraft currently? So you can move the aircraft around, check the HSI, and you can see, well, I'm just down to the southwest of that. Move the aircraft across to the top, watch the flag change from to, see the HSI needle move across the other side, and you can see that you're now northeast of the nav aid. Now, I don't use VORs in Echo Yankee Zulu, I'll be honest, I use GPS a lot more, but they're used quite widely in the US, so if I ever fly there, this is a good tool for me to keep up to speed and practice with. But I also just like using this on the it's a bit nerdy, but on the couch in the evenings at home, I'll basically use this to practice, just so if I ever do have to shoot, say my GPS goes and I need to shoot a VOR approach, that, you know, my brain still understands, well, how they work, because they can be confusing sometimes. And this is a brilliant tool for it. You're probably familiar with live ATC, but again, when you're learning to fly, people often ask me, well, you've got any tips for learning to fly? Just listen to air traffic control communication as often as you can. Live ATC is probably the most popular. You can basically just click on your country, choose Australia, scroll down to Melbourne, and I can see what's happening in the airspace here. Not only good for student pilots, I actually, again, very nerdy, but I Bluetooth my phone with live ATC quite often in my car when I'm driving to the airport, just to get an indication of what's going on out there. What are other pilots doing? Are people deviating for weather? Are there any incidents at any airports that I should know about? And just get a bit of an idea of the state of play before you get to an airport. Not just a good tool for student pilots, but also for, well, everyone's a student pilot, I suppose, at the end of the day. For all pilots, I thoroughly recommend live ATC. Not sponsored. Once I've landed somewhere, an app I quite like using just to give me an idea of things to do when I'm on the ground. I quite like walking. I sometimes take my folding bike in the plane with me as well. And All Trails is a really good one, which gives you basically GPS coordinates and pinpoints for walks and running tracks and cycle paths that other people have walked on or run on or cycled on. People give updates as to the conditions as well, so quite often if there's been some heavy rain, I check all trails before I go somewhere if I'm planning to go for a walk when I land, and I can just see the conditions of that path as well. I really like it. It's a good app to give you some ideas for planning. Goes without saying, but I have YouTube on my iPad as well, which I use when I'm on the ground. If I've landed somewhere after a flight, actually, and to be serious for a second, if you've had the stress of a flight, and there's a lot of work to a flight, even though it's not stressful per se. If I've got my favorite like YouTuber that I want to watch online, I just pull up a couple of videos, watch them, have some downtime, decompress a little bit before getting back in the aircraft again. So I've got YouTube on here. As pilots as well, I do think that we should be challenging our minds whenever we can, keeping them engaged and active. So Wordle is obviously one of my favorite games on the iPad, but there is this other app which I want you to download. It's called Airport Codes. And if you like Wordle, even if you don't, you still like aviation. If you like Wordle and aviation, this is absolutely for you. But it's basically Wordle for airport codes. All right, so what is the 4-digit ICAO airport code for Bahrain? So let's go DBAH. All right, so just like Wordle, B is correct. Okay, this is going to embarrass me now. I don't know what the first letter is. Damn it! Oh, IBJK. So it ends in I, so Bahrain, WBGI. Nearly. LBCI. God damn it, come on. BUI? What could it be? BBI? Ah, something BBI. What's O? Must be O. In just 10 guesses. Beat that. If I've missed a free app that you use for aviation on your iPad or iPhone, put it in the comments below so everybody can benefit from it. Otherwise, thank you as always for watching. Big love to you all. Bye.